cities. The European Climate Risk Assessment warns that without adaptation and with an aging population, extreme heat-related deaths could only rise, and rise quite significantly. The EU's One Health approach fosters collaboration across health and environmental sectors to improve monitoring, awareness and early response. The European Climate and Health Observatory serves as a hub for sharing information, tools, knowledge and capacity-building resources on climate-related health risks. Heat waves also accelerate the spread of vector-borne diseases. The Commission, through its Health Emergency Preparedness and Response Authority, HERA, is helping to develop targeted diagnostics, therapeutics and vaccines against mosquito-borne diseases increasingly found in the EU. Honourable members, on housing, over 75% of Europeans live in cities which in many ways bear the brunt of climate impacts, but are also key hubs of innovation. The Commission has promoted passive cooling techniques in new and renovated buildings. We are also ensuring that the most efficient cooling machines hit the market thanks to eco-design and energy labelling regulations. Other efforts include sustainable urban planning that helps to reduce heat island effects and efficient renewable-based district cooling that makes active cooling more sustainable. All these solutions also help to reduce energy use and bills when it's very warm. The Commission has also established a new housing task force to support drafting of the European Affordable Housing Plan due in early 2026. And yesterday you have all heard the announcements of the President of the Commission in the context of housing, including the Housing Summit. Honourable members, we also urgently need to step up adaptation with an integrated framework for European climate resilience and risk management. This is one of the key actions under the Preparedness Union strategy. It is planned for the end of 2026. And it will be part of a broader agenda to safeguard Europe's productivity and prosperity, security and well-being while boosting competitiveness. We are also focusing on 5 priorities: introducing a common legal framework for better understanding climate risk and to clarify risks ownership and to set shared reference scenarios. Secondly, building resilience and preparedness into all EU policies, including our long-term budget. Third, giving citizens and businesses the tools to identify climate hazards and access resilience solutions. Fourth, helping companies to turn climate resilience into innovation, investment and new markets. And fifth, mobilizing private financing with better insurance models, showing that resilience is not a cost but an investment in our future. Honourable members, the toll of this summer's heat waves has been disastrous. We need to reduce emissions, but just as importantly, we need to adapt and prepare for the changing climate. This will continue to be a top priority going forward for the Commission. Thank you very much.
Paldies. Vārds Eiropas Tautas partijas grupas vārdā Tomislavs Sokol.
On behalf of the EBP, Mr. Sokol.
Povjereniče, potpredsjedniče, kolegice I kolege. Ekstremne vrućine više nisu iznimka. U posljednja...
Colleagues, extreme heat waves is not an exception now. The summers are very hot, and only in 2022 many people died, much more than previously. Also, there were many technical problems, and also there were more psychiatric patients because the bodies could not regulate temperature. Between 2022 and 2024, dengue illness has risen by 30% in Europe. The health systems are not completely prepared for such kinds of problems. This is not something that we are warning about for the future. This is a problem already today. People don't live well because their housing is not adequate and they are too hot. I'm the coordinator in the EPP for health matters, and that is why I would like to urge for transnational cooperation. I should also stress that we have to improve the health systems, not only invest more in pharmaceuticals, but we see that public health is not a priority anymore. We should change our approach, and we should have the European fund in the same ways that there was in the previous mandate. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le Commissaire.
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner, colleagues. Heat waves are social crises, first of all. It's the most vulnerable people who are the first to be affected, and this question has to be better taken account of. People live in flats that are like saunas. You can't cool your body down and deal with the crisis. Quality of life, quality of health are absolutely essential, and that requires support. And as Mr. Sokol just said, this is a health crisis. There's a direct impact on human health, but we're all exposed to all sorts of chemicals and, in our daily lives, and we know that the increase in temperatures amplifies the effects of these chemicals and causes chronic disease. So this is a question of public health and how we organize our cities. Finally, we need to stop distinguishing the battle against climate change and the battle for adapting to climate change. We need an ecological transition. It needs to be consistent in our cities, in our housing, to try and limit both emissions of greenhouse gases and help people to live better with it.
So, colleagues, I of course, in the first round, give a bit more time, but please understand we have one additional point in agenda today, so before the vote. So, next speaker from European Patriots, Mireia Boras Pavon, for 1 minute.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen. In the Commission, climate has become a religion because every time there is a heat wave here, we've seen this in Spain for the last 20 years, 3,000 people died. And we see that heat waves are not the apocalypse that you want to portray them as. They're nothing new. It's something that we've seen across time with different intensities and frequencies. However, what is new now is not the climate, as I said, but the Green Deal, which has started since 2019. In this demonic Green Deal, you try to prohibit a number of different areas, and the diesel car has become the enemy of everything. And what we're seeing in Spain is that this is affecting everyone. A third of the fires produced in Fine were lit on purpose. But we're seeing that this is not taken into account in your fanatical environmental policies. What we're seeing, the consequences of all of your policies, is that your policies don't make sense. The speaker's microphone has been cut.
To be fair, so you are extending more than 20 seconds. Thank you very much. Next speaker for European Conservative Reformist Group, Sergio Bellato.
Signor Presidente.
President, Commissioner, distinguished colleagues. Now, we talk about global warming as though this were something unprecedented and as though it was all caused by human activity. But, you know, there are scientists who tell a different story, because thousands of years ago, the average temperature of the Earth was much higher than it is now. And, of course, now we're using carbons derived from oil. And studies have concluded that this will have catastrophic consequences. But we have serious scientists with seriously documented research who have shown that climate change has always existed and will always exist. And we just have different levels of solar intensity. It has ever been thus throughout human history. Whereas we are now seeing this ideology being used to penalise the public and for the purposes of justifying taxes to limit individual freedoms, and there are no rational justifications for this. Thank you.
Renew Europe Group Svarda, Vice-President Martin.
Thank you. Now for Renew Europe, the Vice President, Mr. Huys.
Thank you very much. Thousands of human lives every single year. That's what we're talking about here. So many lives have been lost. The climate crisis is becoming a catastrophe, and we have to deal with the cause of this catastrophe. Mitigation and adaptation are needed. So what is in the epicenter of all of this? Well, it's our cities and our apartments. Adaptation means that we are going to have to be able to survive heat waves without people dying. So that is part of the solution too. Our apartments, our houses, have to be insulated. It's not just a question of using less energy in winter, it's also a question of dealing properly with heat waves. What we need is support for energy efficiency. We have to support the renovation of housing, and we have to make our cities greener again so that these extremes can be survivable in future.
Thank you. For the Greens, Madam Schilling.
Liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen,
colleagues, now just imagine you're an elderly lady in hospital and the window might be open, but you've got very oppressive heat coming from the outside. So climate change really is perceptible, it's tangible, and it has repercussions. And we are leaving elderly people languishing in their hospital beds, struggling for breath. And we're there shrugging, saying, well, what can we do? We're all here in this chamber talking about heat waves as though this were just a matter of fate. But it is not. Rather, it is time that we took climate change seriously and saw it for what it is, and that is a health risk which does not affect us all equally. And it is important that we do what is expected and make sure that we take the matter seriously. And just imagine you're the daughter sitting at the bedside hoping desperately that somebody will do something, that somebody will at long last get a grip. Those of us who can do something about this. And precisely here we are seeing the climate crisis being a social issue. It's those who can do least who bear the brunt, particularly those who are elderly or frail or those who live in poor housing who simply can't afford to renovate their flats. So let's take this seriously. This is a social issue. This is a health issue. And just imagine you're at the bedside of that elderly lady.
Thank you. And now for the left, Madam Montero, 1 minute. Ladies and gentlemen, this year Spain was on fire because of the heat wave, and we see the climate change and abandonment of rural areas is a danger. But we also are in danger because of improper public services. I want to express solidarity with people who are affected and ask you whether you know that in October this year, other people are going to lose their jobs, and we know that the EPP has cut 28% from the prevention budget, and this is affecting fires. A lot of services are privatized now. There's a small group of companies in Spain called the Fire Cartel, and these are not public and involved in fire protection. These are merely pouring fire on the flames. Fires have always exacted, but not like we're seeing today. We need to be better prepared. Preventing and extinguishing fires should remain public. It's key. It cannot be seen as business. It has to be nationalised. We need to ensure that these people have the material that they need. And people are spending money on rearming, and instead they should be invested in our firemen.
Thank you very much. Next speaker from sovereign nation Europe, Imhild Bosdorf.
Der Hitzesommer ist in diesem Jahr
Now, heatwave this summer, as usual, we had a rainy July and then a sunny August. Now, it's rather surprising that we're now talking about housing and health policy. Is that a way in which we can counter a summer heatwave? Berlin certainly has spent 20,000 euros on public fountains and on various urban measures, but planting trees would be cheaper. But we have a policy in which we allow people to immigrate, those whose cultures are remote from our own, which exacerbates the crisis. And we are seeing the ideology of late summer, and we have various people being killed by migrants, and we have all people then failing to talk about this as a complicity of silence. And it's time that we now fought for the kind of Europe in which people feel safe and in which freedom of speech prevails. Thank you.
The next speaker, go ahead.
Mr. Commissioner, dear colleagues, geopolitics changes Europe's climate changes, but geopolitics changes in decades, and the climate usually changes during millennia. No longer. Europe's climate used to be predictable 30 years ago. Now we have heat waves alternating with cold periods. This is devastating not only to agriculture, it also claims lives. In 2022, over 60,000 people died due to heat waves. The human body, especially those of the elderly and the ill people, is simply not prepared for this. As the Commission rightly said, we need to deal with causes and consequences together. Climate mitigation should have its place in housing and health policy. We need to do something about the housing crisis and the climate crisis at the same time. We need affordable social housing, but we also need to prepare residential, social institutions and hospitals for these heat waves. But heat wave protocols in hospitals is not enough. We need air conditioning. This can save lives. But if we are cooling inside, we are generating heat outside. Another additional problem to urban microclimate. That's why we need passive solutions, such as isolation and light color roofs and facades. This can reduce the interior temperature and reduce the load on the electricity grid. We don't have a silver bullet, but together we can find a solution to these problems.
Thank you. Now, Madam Helen Fritzon, 1 minute.
Herr talman!
Thank you very much, President. Well, yes, we have to say it the way it is. Climate change is not a threat for the future. The effects of global warming are already here. Our new reality is the one that we lived through this summer, with heat waves from north to south. People are suffering. People are dying. Our societies are not prepared to deal with these extreme heat waves. We have to act, and we have to invest. We have to invest in our housing, in our cities, in our infrastructure. We need to do that so that we can adapt to this new reality. It is going to cost us a lot of money to deal with the consequences. So that's precisely why we have to reduce emissions. That's why we need to continue to invest in renewable energy. We simply cannot afford to listen to the climate skeptics on the right when they try to set the agenda. It is not the moment to be passive. We need political courage, and that's what we need to show here in the EU. We have to take leadership.
Thank you. Now, Madame Brasier-Klein for 1 minute.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, colleagues. A recent study in Nature set out the mortality due to heat in European cities and how it will look by 2050 if nothing is done. Over 25 deaths per 100,000 inhabitants in some of the big cities in the south, and also a massive increase in the north. Cities are heating at twice the average global rate. This is a problem because of an aging population and because we don't have air conditioning largely. 20% in the UK, 25% in the Netherlands, whereas it's 90% in the USA or Japan. So we have to focus in the Spanish model, who have they've massively cut their mortality during the hottest periods. At the same time, we have to fight against subsidies for ineffective gadgets and focus the funds on what actually works.
Blue card from Mr. Clergeau. No. Thank you. You already also were the speaker, so Mr. Clergeau. So let's go ahead. Let's go ahead. So next speaker, Guillaume Pelletier.
C'est le nouveau tube des réchauffés du climat.
Now, it's hot in summer is the new refrain. Oh, and it's cold in winter as well. So always the same exhortations. If you drive a car, you're a polluter. If you use fuel oil, then you're a criminal. You're some kind of a monster. You're some kind of a peasant. And if, God forbid you have a lot of children, you are guilty. This seems to be the capital sin, the vice of the 21st century, and there is no mercy for those people, whereas in actual fact, you don't know anything about our lives whatsoever. I live in a hamlet in rural France, in the midst of the forests, and we have the seasons, we have flowers, wild animals that I see in, day out, and I cherish them, and I don't need your moralistic preaching to love what God has given us. And of course, we have people in Saint-Germain-des-Prés or in Bruxelles lecturing us, stop taking us for imbeciles, leave us alone.
Yeah, would you take a blue card? No, you are in hurry, so thank you. Sorry about Mr. Clergeau. Okay, next speaker is Vlad Vasile Voiculescu.
Dear colleagues, in Romania we already see what heat waves mean, and that means elderly people fainting at bus stops in Bucharest, farmers watching their crops burn, workers in Spain and Italy collapsing under the sun. These are not statistics, they are our neighbors, our families. Last summer, in just 12 European cities, heat waves killed over 2,300 people. I can only imagine what the true number across the continent is. Beyond the lives lost, hospitals overheat, children miss school and harvests are destroyed. We cannot wait. We must invest in homes that stay cool, in farmers who need resilient crops and irrigation, and in health systems that can protect the most vulnerable. We must plant trees that can survive the new climate. These are the trees that will provide shadow for our kids. We must accelerate the green transition. The planet has run out of patience. Our people, though, are still expecting us to act. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Marie Toussaint, 1 minute.
Chers collègues, Monsieur le Commissaire.
Colleagues, Commissioner, the right to fit housing should be a fundamental right. But unfortunately, this is not the case for millions of Europeans, for millions of homeless people, and tens of millions who suffer from poor housing and live in houses like saunas. Europe is affected to more and more heat waves that are of increasing intensity. People don't know where to go to breathe to avoid heart problems. This summer, over 1,000 people died prematurely in Spain. Commissioner, and I hope you pass this on to your colleagues, health should really be our guiding compass when it comes to European housing policy. We have to fight against energy insecurity, ensuring that we renovate our houses to provide cool housing for those who need it, to ensure that everyone can have access to a fan, to ensure that everyone has access to green spaces, particularly in more deprived areas. I didn't grow up in Saint-Germain-des-Prés. I grew up in housing estates in Bordeaux. Europe has to act, otherwise it will not be assisting those who need it.
Speaker Dario Tamburano for 1 minute.
Gli alberi.
Trees are extremely useful in mitigating urban heat islands. They reduce our spending on cooling buildings, they sequester carbon, they cool asphalt, and they improve health. They are truly a marvel. And reforestation is something that resources have been earmarked for under our NRRPs. And that is something good that the Union has done. It wasn't so good to allow exemptions to the nature restoration law and allow people to cut down trees merely with a promise to plant others elsewhere. It is important that we have mature trees, because young trees that are replanted often don't survive our heat waves. And that is why we should have micro-forests, such as in where we've had trees cut down to build a sports stadium. So we have got to make sure that good intentions don't lead us on a hellish path. There shouldn't be compensation. We need to face up to a climate crisis, not a football crisis.
Milan Mazurek for 1 minute.
Vy nám tu chcete prísť prednášať o nedostupnom...
You are trying to tell us that we are not doing enough for housing, and that there are not enough flats, and that it's somehow being linked together with heat waves. Well, every single year you're inundating Europe with migrants instead. That means that Europeans don't have enough housing as a result. There's not enough money for our citizen services. That leads to a very difficult life for our young people. Everything is too expensive for our own citizens. Building materials are much too expensive too. So that is why it is so expensive to pay the rent and to renovate houses. Young people don't even imagine that they could possibly afford a proper house. And then, on top of that, you look at the European Union, which is now saying it wants to combat climate change and it can stop it. Well, we need to get rid of Mrs. von der Leyen.
Στην Ελλάδα, οι πολίτες υποφέρουν από κάθε...
Greeks are suffering because of heat waves. Public water providers, which are now privatized, were no longer able to provide what was necessary. Fires are occurring. Windmills are taking over mountains and natural areas. This is a neoliberal policy. The country is being sacrificed for profit. There is no compensation for this. In Albania, 111 square kilometers with Greek minorities in it have been burned, and these people have received no assistance. This is an attempt to move the Greek minority and colonize this area. Europe has to support local communities to prevent building on burned areas and to financing proper housing networks across Europe. Thank you, Mr. Hadji Pantela.
President, Commissioner, housing is a fundamental right. However, across Europe, including Cyprus, hundreds of our citizens do not have adequate housing. The response of Ms. von der Leyen and the promise of decent housing for all is not enough. We need to act. The European Investment Bank must draw up a funding program And member states' governments, including the government of Cyprus, must come forward with concrete proposals for decent housing. This is a fundamental right for all of us and an obligation to future generations.
Thank you. Mr. Andriukaitis.
Thank you, the Chairman. Commissioner, of course, the summer heat waves in Europe have become an urgent crisis, claiming over 175,000 lives per year annually. It's a very big challenge for all of us. Of course, it's not only an environmental issue, not only social issue, it also is public health issue. And of course, it costs a lot. It also creates a lot of economic challenges. European Union must address the causes and consequences of climate change as it is affecting the basic rights to health, security and life of citizens. And of course, we need comprehensive housing policies, as just all speakers mentioned, about cooling system and so on. Of course, healthcare systems must be equipped and must be prepared because it's crisis issue, like cross-border healthcare directive, like cross-border healthcare threats, climate change also belongs to them. And we need, of course, financial means. And it means European Health Union should be expanded and should be equipped by all programs. And of course, health policies is one clear example.
Colleague Andriukaitis, would you take a blue card, please? Colleague Andriukaitis. Would you agree to take a blue card, not from Mr. Frojo, but from Mr. Sokol? Please.
Thank you very much, dear colleague, for speaking out about the necessity and the magnitude of this problem and necessity to act. My question is, since this clearly shows that we need investments into public health infrastructure, in our public health systems, do you think that EU should have, again, like it was in the previous 7-year budget, a separate health fund, separate earmarked health program, unlike what is proposed now in the latest proposal by the Commission? Thanks.
Absolutely, for sure. I think we all are like-minded here. We need to have EU for health separate program, Commissioner. Absolutely, because you have no chance to solve problems without very effective financial means. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, colleagues. So next speaker, Tiago Moreira de Sá, for 1 minute, please.
Thank you, President. Europe is facing increasingly intense heat waves with a major impact on public health, particularly for vulnerable groups like elderly people, children, and people with chronic illnesses. That's what happened in Portugal. We had one of the biggest wildfire seasons in Europe, and it brought out the lack of protection for local populations. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to pay homage to this summer's victims of the wildfires and our fire brigade, who are national heroes. Member States need to take the responsibility to rise to the challenge and make solutions that are adapted to each country. The effectiveness of the measures depends on whether they're adapted to local reality. However, there has been too much negligence on the part of the political class that has endangered people's health and well-being. The European Union should not be imposing uniform rules in line with subsidiarity, but rather it should be helping the 27 member states to take the necessary measures and help the citizens most effective. As Dante wrote, the laws are there, but who will enforce them?
Would you accept a blue card from Mr. Peugeot? Thank you. Micro, you cannot switch it?
Thank you. Merci, Monsieur le Député.
Thank you very much for accepting my question. I just wanted to understand one thing. Your Spanish colleague from Vox, from your political group, said that in Spain there was no heat wave that was any more serious than 10 years ago and that all of the data was wrong. But you've just said that Portugal has just had a terrible heat wave with dramatic consequences, which you've just recalled for us. Is there a difference of opinion or a difference in weather between Portugal and Spain? Or is it a different vision within the Patriots group? Thank you very much for the question. I'll try and answer it in French. My colleague isn't in the room, so she's not in a position to respond to you, and I can't respond for her. But what I can tell you is that in Portugal, this summer was very hot.
Years with the previous years. So actually I cannot respond to your question except to say that my colleague she is very good and she can answer for herself. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, Gregory Arlion, for 1 minute, please.
Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le Commissaire.
President, Commissioner, colleagues. For some people, summer means holidays. For others, it means isolation and housing like a sauna. This summer, Europe was hit by heatwaves, 48 degrees in Sicily, 46 in Spain, and even higher temperatures in Scandinavia. This is not an exceptional situation. It's a snapshot of what awaits us. And it always affects the most vulnerable the most. Energy insecurity knows no season. Poorer households are exposed to warmer houses. These houses that are like freezers in the winter are also the ones that become saunas in the summer. Our populations are aging, and in France we've seen hundreds of people who have died this summer. We've also seen an increase in 42% in deaths linked to the heat in the workplace. We have to act for all of these people to protect our citizens. They don't want to see a climate plan that's just PR. We have to build a resilient society, an egalitarian society, because our citizens deserve more than just surviving the heat. They deserve to live in safety and dignity. Now, Madam Tilly Metz, 1 minute.
Heat waves are caused by climate change. They disturb our lives, our sleep. They are dangerous and often deadly. Among floods, droughts, fires, it's heat waves that are the most dangerous. I'm thinking of many people here. Yes, of children, of elderly people, of people with chronic or disabilities, of people, yes, living in overheated apartments. They cannot escape from the heat waves. Heat waves do not hit equally, but policies must protect equally. When the wealthy buy air conditioning and pay high energy bills, the most vulnerable suffer and end up in hospitals. Health policies and climate policies go hand in hand. You might say, yeah, but now the heat is over. But it will come back again next year, and it will cause suffering. It will cause closing of schools. It will slow down our economy, and it will affect people's health. But we can do something. We can act. If we have the courage to act, we must do it. Climate change denial cost life. Protecting and investing in nature is the only solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, Elena Kontur.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ, κύριε Πρόεδρε. Κύριε Επίτροπε.
Thank you, President. Commissioner. Europe is heating faster than the rest of the world. The temperatures this summer have reached record levels. In Greece, in recent years, the situation has become unbearable for the most vulnerable citizens. We need European support in order to ensure that our citizens can withstand the challenges of climate change. We need to renovate houses and buildings and to ensure that housing is affordable. The Commissioner should include this as a priority in its plan for affordable and dignified housing to ensure that prices are affordable for all citizens. Citizens' health is the key question here. The housing crisis is worsening the situation of our most vulnerable citizens. It's our duty to protect local communities.
Thank you very much. Mr. Humberto next. President, thank you very much. Commissioner, colleagues, in 2022, more than 60,000 European citizens lost their lives as a result of excess heat. This reality requires responses. First of all, in the area of housing, we must accelerate the air conditioning systems to combat heat waves in cities. We cannot accept a situation where our houses are a risk factor. Secondly, health. We need to reinforce coordination between national systems with prevention plans. We need to have vigilance for epidemics and particular attention to the most vulnerable, the elderly, children, and those who are chronically ill. Adaptation to climate change will require pragmatism, responsibility, and a collective commitment. That is what our citizens expect from Europe. Thank you. Thank you very much. The floor goes to Alicia Holmes-Janel.
Thank you very much indeed, President. Commissioner, the extreme heat of this summer is not just an anecdote, it is a real threat and affects thousands of people across Europe. People who suffer from heat stress, affects families and people who are seeing their energy costs soar because their homes are poorly insulated. So tackling this problem is not only to help the planet, but is also to save lives. Denying science, denying climate change will not help us because we find that these kinds of policies kill. We have seen this firsthand this summer. If we have just one extreme heat wave, then we see that leads to the death of over 1,500 people in Europe, and that is precisely why Spain is suggesting this sustainability pact, and it's important that it be ambitious and to be implemented as soon as possible. Let's be serious. Europe requires urgent responses. We need to invest in sustainable energy, and we need to help people in their homes and at work, and we need to defend the health and well-being of people above and beyond any ideology.
Mrs. Ferenc is the next speaker for 1 minute.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Commissioner, dear colleagues, the heat waves of last summer pose a critical challenge to the whole of Europe. Forest fires, overloaded health systems, and the tragic death of thousands of our fellow citizens means we have to act and act now. Our strategy provides a framework, but we also need to improve the resilience of residential and social institutions, of course, while respecting member state competencies. The new energy program in Hungary is exemplary. Heat pumps, renewable energy are helping lots of people. We are isolating, changing windows. For modern ones, the housing crisis and the reinforcing of our health systems is our common task.
Ferenc, would you take a blue card from Mr. Kulia?
Yes.
Tisztelt képviselőtár!
Dear colleague, what we have heard is all very nice, but this does not really correspond to reality. All public data show that in terms of our health system and energy efficiency, Hungary's housing is lagging behind the rest of Europe. And in terms of hospitals, the situation is even worse. You wasted all the money available between 2020 and 24. Hungarians are paying the price while you spent billions for football stadiums.
Kedves képviselőtársam,
dear colleague, thank you for your question. It's rather unfortunate that of course, yes, indeed there are shortcomings, but you are trying to make political capital out of this. I only have a few seconds available, so I'm only going to say this. We have kept energy prices low, which protects them against heat waves, for example. And from 2025, we are going to make available hundreds of billions to those families the most in need.
Christina Singer, for 1 minute, please.
President, Commissioner, colleagues, the record-breaking heat wave of this summer shows very clearly that it's time to act. when it comes to protecting us from the climate. It's protection for our citizens. The 2040 goal of minus 90% is ambitious, but it is necessary. We need to ensure that it's pragmatic and implementable. We need to continue investment in renewable energy, and investment in sustainable heating and cooling need to be made. The important thing is that jobs and companies are protected. We need greener cities, we need flats that are better protected from heat, we need hospitals and care facilities that are ready for extreme summer weather. Climate policy should not be ideological. It should be providing realistic solutions, and that's the only way we'll remain credible. This is the signal that this Parliament now needs to be sending out, here in Europe and at the international level, as we move towards the COP30. The next speaker is Kai Tegethoff for 1 minute.
Heatwave, Hitzewelle, Ola de calor, omnipresent last summer, this summer, and probably every future summer from now on. But still, we are not taking adequate action to fight the root cause of the problem, climate change. Heatwave after heatwave. Commission President von der Leyen yesterday talked here about heatwaves, and I hear and support what you say, Commissioner. But at the same time, the Commission's missing action showcases in a hurtful way that there actually is no commitment to act. No strategy to address health problems of our citizens in overheated cities, no credible action on droughts, no credible attempts to save our forests, water bodies, or to restore nature, no political will to change our ways of life accordingly. Standing ovations for the difficult and dangerous work of firefighters are nice, but they don't even address the core of the problem. We need to act, step up our efforts on mitigation, and finally start to actually adapt to the ongoing climate change.
Thank
you. The floor goes to Estrella Galán. 1 minute.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, President. Ladies and gentlemen, over 3,600 people died in Spain this summer because of the heat, 82% more than the previous summer. These are not statistics, these are lives. And generally, we're talking about very vulnerable people, elderly people, workers, and even children. And it's not just in the south of Europe. Even every year, Europe breaks temperature and heat records. People say that we're climate fanatics, as if climate change was an ideological question, whereas it's a reality and it kills. And so we need to act now. We need to work for our citizens in homes and schools and workplaces. In Spain, we have pioneering legislation to protect workers with basic measures such as stopping work at the highest times of highest temperature or having heat alerts, because it's not difficult. It's just a question of political will. And so this Parliament has to do something if it doesn't want to be strangled by the reactionary far right.
Marcos Ross Semper is the next speaker for 1 minute.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you very much, President. Commissioner, we broke 59 separate temperature records in Spain this summer. We've had an extra 2.5 degrees as compared to the beginning of the century, and we've just seen the 4 hottest Augusts in our history. Climate change caused more than 20,000 deaths across Europe, and this is over the figures of the last 5 years, and our neighbourhoods and our buildings were, of course, designed before the onset of this phenomenon, and beyond 2027 we will need more resources for cohesion and for the green transition, and not just be writing blank cheques to the member states. That's the only way that we can face up to these soaring temperatures. So Europe has to stand behind the Green Deal. The right cannot deny the scientific consensus, and we cannot backslide when it comes to our climate policies, because to do so would be to abandon our citizenry in the face of this massive challenge.
The next speaker is Alexander Nikolic for 1 minute. Well, how hypocritical can we be about climate change? Because you are the main cause. In my country, France, 50% of greenhouse gas emissions are linked to imports. We need to develop national markets and relocalize our industries to reduce imports. But Mrs. von der Leyen is doing the absolute opposite. With the agreement with New Zealand from 2023, which is just 20,000 kilometers from Paris, she now is going on to sign the agreement with Mercosur, which will sacrifice our farmers, but on top of that, it will drastically increase our imports and thus increase our greenhouse gas emissions. So that is the main cause of global warming, but you prefer to attack the drivers or deprive poor families of their gas boilers. We're paying more and more expensive electricity thanks to intermittent generating sources. So let's propose a solution. Mrs. von der Leyen, leave power. Thank you very much. The floor now goes to Mr. Marza Ibanez.
This summer, most workers in Europe had it worse than in the past. There were 90 tropical nights in Valencia, and lots of workers can't afford air conditioning. In my city, more people died this summer because of the heat than during some of the worst times of the COVID pandemic. And here, what are people doing? We're seeing people protect the those responsible for this heat, for the most polluting companies, for rich people who travel in private aeroplanes. Because climate change attacks the weakest. If you want to fight climate change, then you are fighting the people in most difficult situations and European citizens. And the far right denies climate change. And in doing that, they only protect those at the top. If you're fighting climate change, that's fighting for the majority in Europe.
Well, just imagine family with 3 kids in a small flat in a city in which summer lasts 8 weeks longer in southern Europe, and you will find, all the trees being cut down on the public squares. These are a result of the negationist policies being pursued by the right, particularly in the south of Europe, whereas in actual fact, protecting human health is a duty. Fighting climate change does not only mean tackling root causes, but also adapting the way in which we live, the way in which we work, and making sure that our housing is fit for purpose, particularly and especially for those who have the fewest resources. Climate change should mean social justice, and failing to recognise that is irresponsible and is an attack on those with least. And we repeatedly have said that denying climate change costs lives, and it's not actually the most vulnerable who are gobbling up our resources. We need to tackle climate change, as I say, because it costs lives. Negation costs lives, whereas climate adaptation saves lives. That is the lesson we should take away from all of this.
Speaker Marie Doshi, for 1 minute, please.
Well, this summer, millions of Europeans suffered under heat waves. More than 42 degrees in France, 46 degrees in Spain. 1 million hectares were burnt. And today, finally, you're asking yourselves about what you could possibly do about this. You're pretending to be firemen, but you're actually the fire setters. Yes, there's high CO2, but it's your obsession with trade that is making the thermometer go through the roof. Your rules have already destroyed the rental market for housing, and your budgetary rules have destroyed public services. So now you're trying to further extend your powers to the very heart of French citizens' daily lives in housing and health. So you shouldn't be surprised when you find that hospitals are full during heat waves. You betrayed the Europe of the nations. You ruined our economies. You have smothering our peoples. Now it's going to be up to us to repair what you've broken.
Accept the blue card, please, from Madame Bosse. No? No. Sorry. Madam. So we will continue. Next speaker, Marko Vešligaj.
Hvala, predsjedavajući.
Thank you, President. In 2025, we recorded one of the strongest heat wave ever. The temperatures went above 42 degrees, and every fifth person was not able to air condition their home. This is the issue of equality. The situation is especially dramatic in rural areas in Croatia. 63% of the Croatian territory is accounted for by rural areas, the areas that actually face depopulation, where youth is living. And the people remaining live in houses without having their basic standards met, with very high energy bills. This is why the new European Affordable Housing Plan has to have a special component pertaining to rural areas, investing in energy renewal, energy efficiency, and nature protection. As an MEP, I will be fighting in the European Parliament that the entire Croatia, as well as other smaller rural areas, are afforded resources to tackle these issues, because the energy poverty is not something that should negatively impact our citizens. It is our responsibility to solve it.
Mr. Arnautoğlu, 1 minute.
Colleagues, 25 years since I began my studies and my work as a meteorologist in the Greek media, I am constantly surprised by the increases in temperature, and particularly last summer. We experienced temperatures that are a risk to citizens' health and lives. Workers in Greece, construction workers, had to work in dangerous conditions. We must take drastic measures in order to cut emissions and to protect our citizens, to offer people proper, suitable housing, and do what we can to renovate housing where possible, to ensure better energy efficiency. We know that extreme temperatures threaten all citizens. Nobody should be left behind.
Gli effetti del cambiamento climatico.
The effects of climate change continue to hit European citizens. We've seen the effects in all our countries, seen a proliferation of natural disasters and all the effects on public health. But the effects are not equally spread. They strike the weakest most hard, and they exacerbate inequality as well as social disparities. Many European countries experienced unprecedented heat waves, and others are dealing as a matter of urgency with the causes of climate change. And as an institution, we are duty-bound to try to mitigate the effects of climate change. And we need to look at overhauling and modernizing the housing of the most vulnerable. Also, make sure that town planners make sure that our urban areas can deal with these challenges. We have people who are being pushed to use their air conditioning more often, and that leads inexorably to the warming of our cities, whereas we should be looking at ways of improving the quality of people's lives and helping our environment.
I have 3 speakers on the list. First will be Maria Grappini.
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner, colleagues. Well, today we're talking about policy consistency when it comes to housing and health policy. But there are people here who have got criticisms. Well, citizens don't expect of us that every single issue has to be polarized and politicized. Rather, we're talking about heat waves. These heat waves are smothering Europe. And, of course, we could talk about climate change, but mitigating that is going to take time. We need more prevention for the moment. That means more energy-efficient housing. to do that, we need funding. Citizens need funding to adapt their housing. And when it comes to health policy, there are hospitals where patients are forced to suffer in summer, sweating in their beds and freezing in winter. So we need better hospitals, we need better education for citizens as to how they can protect themselves in their apartments and out on the street. And we also need to improve healthcare, especially emergency care.
Thank you very much, President. Ladies and gentlemen, the EU has gone mad. You think that you are able to save the world. The EU is responsible for 6% of emissions and China is responsible for 30%. And it's a madness. You are obsessed with climate change. This is your new vision of reality. Climate instead of God. Europeans are supposed to drive Chinese cars, wear Chinese clothes, and there is supposed to be no economy here in Europe. We are going to be at the favors of Russian military, and we, as the representatives of the Law and Justice Party, will not allow Europe to become a skansen to which the Americans and the Chinese come because there is no modern technology or economy here.
Gracias, presidente. Una nueva ola de calor.
Thank you very much, President. We're talking about heat. We've had many thousands of people who die as a result of heat waves year in, year out, particularly in the Mediterranean and cities such as Alicante. But studies show us that we've had increases in temperature since 2023, and we've seen an increase in deaths. And we need, therefore, to implement our plans. But to do so, we require political will, and we need funding from our cohesion programs in our cities. And to favour urban planning and public health, we also need to have cool islands, green spaces. Otherwise, all of this has a devastating impact on public health, whereas we should be protecting the most vulnerable in our societies. So you need to tell us about your plans. You need to tell us about exchanging best practice. That's what we're doing in Spain. We've got various climate refuges in Barcelona. We've also got to counter disinformation and denial. Both cost lives.
We are closing catch-eye procedure, and Commissioner Serafin, floor is yours for respond on behalf of Commission. So please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Honourable members, I will start by thanking this House for the initiative to have an important debate, a debate on summer heat waves in the European Union. And the focus of this debate, and that was very clear, was about providing adequate housing and health policies to address record-breaking temperatures. Whether we should provide proper health policies and adequate housing should not be a topic that divides us. We all agree that extreme heat waves are increasing, and we know that they will continue to increase. It is a challenge for our societies, and we have to address it. Today we have heard many important voices calling for stronger action on climate adaptation. Climate adaptation is needed urgently to accompany also actions in the area of mitigation. So we know that we need to promote new and efficient cooling and heating technologies. Many of you have said so. Designing our cities in smarter ways to prevent overheating. Green cities, that was also mentioned in this debate. We need to have more green spaces in our cities. We need also to protect elderly and vulnerable citizens from the effects of heat waves. And indeed, investments in housing, investments in energy and efficiency of our housing is an important area of intervention. But we have also heard about the importance of adaptation and investments in our healthcare systems. And I'm not surprised that in that context, in the context of this debate, also the voices related to the MFF proposal were raised, the proposal for the next multi-annual budget. That budget offers opportunities, both for mitigation and also for the adaptation, including in the area of health. And I'm convinced that our regions, our member states, be it in the context of the national and regional partnership plans, also be it in the context of the directly managed programs by the EU budget, that they will work to address those challenges. What I want to say, because there were also voices in that respect, I believe that we need to act on many fronts at the same time. So that or the other spending program alone will not be sufficient. And that refers also to the EU for Health. Actions that are financed today by the EU for Health could be also financed in the future, including in the Competitiveness Fund, but also they can be supported by the national and regional partnership programs. But what I know, and I'm sure about that, to be effective, we need to integrate our actions, and we need to looking for synergies among our existing programs. And I'm pretty sure that with the national and regional partnership plans, with the competitiveness funds, that can work also in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Colleagues, we are closing the debate on this point in agenda. Nākamais darba kārtības punkts, Anna Maja.
So the next item on the agenda is the report by Mrs. Henriksson on implementation and streamlining of the EU internal market rules to strengthen the single market.
Floor is yours.
Tack så mycket.
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner. We need to strengthen our